the Healing Through Love podcast with Charlene Lynch and Rose Davidson. As victims of abuse, we develop dialogue which in turn becomes our scripts for life. In episode 15, Jenni-Lee Keez explains how we can overcome this.
Yeah, finding relevance and finding, if they've got that block of fear or that block of giving themselves permission to own their story, hearing it from somebody else and how they eventually removed that block is probably so powerful for them, to gradually work it through. And when you're working with someone who's got the lived story, the same story as you, then you're also working with somebody who hears you and gets you and understands you. And that was where I fell down. Looking back when I met Joan, I could look back at the other people that I had tried to source answers from, and I could see where that had fallen down. They just wanted to put antidepressants into me because that's where I was. That's what I mean. No one ever said, what is your story to date? And that's the most important question. If your counsellor doesn't ask you what your story is and pull out those story elements that create disturbance when you recall them, then you're not with the right person. Because it's
Welcome to another episode of Healing Through Love. Each week, we share ideas, experiences, and resources to increase the awareness of domestic and family violence and to empower survivors to grow and thrive. We talk with experts who share their advice, or with people who have experienced abuse, no matter where they are on their journey. This is all about healing through love. And now, here are your hosts, Charlene Lynch and Rose Davidson.
Hello and welcome to the Healing Through Love podcast. I'm your host, Charlene Lynch from charlenelynch.com. Healing Through Love is a social enterprise whose vision is to shift awareness on domestic and family violence within the community and support survivors. Our mission is to provide family and domestic violence survivors with a soft place to land by offering advice and services available to them and their families. We interview experts and survivors who have their own stories to share and offer advice and experience, no matter where you are on your journey. As well as the Healing Through Love podcast, we have annual days here in Adelaide and also soon to be Tasmania for survivors of family and domestic violence. Local businesses come together to pay it forward by providing services and resources for the day and give survivors a much needed deserved day of indulgence. Think day spa. Today we've got a very special guest, Jenni-Lee Keez. She's a survivor of 9 years lived experience with anorexia nervosa and many other enduring challenges like migraines, OCD, chronic fatigue. The list goes on. And yet she's here today to stand up and tell her story and how she got through and how she's making impact for others who are on their journey of family and domestic violence. Without any further ado, welcome Jenni-Lee Keez. Hello, how are you, JL?
I'm great, Charlene. Thank you for a wonderful introduction. And it's really great to be back on your show again. And I'm looking forward to the conversation that we're about to engage in.
Yeah, I always love sharing your proximity. You've got such a beautiful, gentle, assuring frequency. It just makes me feel good. So it's great to have you here. Now, Jenny, you've been busy doing lots of things in the wee while. So can you maybe tell us where you've been doing, what you've been up to in your business?
Yes, I'd love to share that with you. Like a lot of us, the last 2 years have been quite challenging. But in amongst all of that, I guess, I've continued to try and build my business, Jenni-Lee Keez Anorexia Unlocked, and learning a lot of aspects of what to do to achieve that outcome. Last year, I was very, very lucky and fortunate that Alicia Young, an award-winning Amazon author, actually saw my book and picked it up, the first book that I've written, Anorexia Unlocked, Understanding Your Story Through Mine. And together, we actually redid that book over the last 12 months and relaunched it at the beginning of this year to make it a better quality product. And I'm so grateful for her walking into my life because I've learned a lot about how to present my myself better and my story through words so that people can appreciate and understand and perhaps connect to my story, connect their story to mine and learn a lot more about themselves through that. In addition to that, I wrote my second book and my third book. And the second one is Recovery and All That Jazz, Mental Illness, Life Events and True Understanding. And the third one, which is just pure, I'll go back to the second one. The second one was one that I was encouraged to write again because, as well as just straight writing, I love to do a lot of verse. I'll get a line and next thing a whole verse is written. And I had about 100 written down. So someone suggested to me, why don't you write another book? And this time put your poetry in or your verse in, and then explain what those words meant for you and what a reader might be able to learn and gain from those words themselves. So that book came to fruition at the beginning of this year, Recovery and All That Jazz, Mental Illness, Life Events and True Understanding. And then I still had about 100 poems left because in January I sat down and wrote another 100. And so my third book, Echoes from My Heart, My Words Gifted to You to Comfort, Guide and Inspire, is also on its way, and both of those will be launched prior to Christmas, depending on my Canadian formatter, who's always very busy but does a brilliant job. So they've been my main focus, and also adding into my business or my offerings for clients is Zoom webinars and setting up the program that would support that one-on-one personal engagement with me. And I decided to do that because I was very, very aware that the proximity of quality people to help people when they're suffering can sometimes be a bit of a deal breaker. And there are a lot of people that live away from, the medical help that they deserve to have. But in this day and age of Zoom meetings and internet, connections, we can make that connection really possible for those clients. So that's why I decided to extend my offering to one-on-one with me. So it doesn't matter where you live in the world or where you live in Australia. If you feel that I'm the person that is the right one to support you through your journey of healing, then we don't need to have that barrier. We just need to set up our Zoom webinar and get on with it. And that did result in some clients from overseas as well, and one girl from the UK I worked with earlier this year, and that was quite an eye-opener for me. I had to keep realising that she was actually in the UK, she was in London, or if she was in her country estate, she'll be walking out with a dog, and I had to get my head around, that's right, she's not in Australia, she's over in the UK. And it was great to connect with her and see her progress through the program that I offered. So that's what I've been doing in terms of the business and wanting to support people who have similar stories to mine of sexual abuse or domestic violence and those sort of traumas which can really impact our dialogue, our script for life, and how we feel to life and how our physical body responds to it as well. So that's what I've been doing since the last time we met, Charlene.
Oh, I love it. So for mothers listening to this with children that have eating disorders,
Yes.
Jenni-Lee Keez is your answer to reach out to her, to have a conversation with you, and also the children, either independently or together as a group. Yes, and if you're further down the track and you yourself have got challenges in and around family and domestic violence, it doesn't necessarily need to be presenting as an eating disorder, but if that's your challenge, then reach out to JL and see how she can help. So all of her information is available on her website, and also access to her amazing books as well, and that connection call to see if you're a good fit, and obviously her programs as well. So these programs that you developed have come from working one-on-one with clients and now realizing that you can, help them progress from where they are to where they want to be. Is that correct?
Some of it's come from clients, but I did set up a lot of the programming prior to setting up the business, I suppose, and drew from the limited clientele that I had at that time. So, pardon me, the programs are more based around my experience and what finally worked for me, because I had gone down a lot of rabbit holes, a lot of doors had opened, and you think, well, this is it, I'm going to, heal, I'm going to understand why my body's not working properly, and then it doesn't eventuate. And then the next one and the next one. And it wasn't until I was in my mid-30s that I met a lady called Joan Hoogstad, who practiced reality therapy. And she asked that turning point question, tell me your story. And that was the turning point for me. You know, no one had ever suggested that my story might hold the clues and therefore the solutions as to why I was suffering and why I had an eating disorder and why I had suicidal depression and OCD and all of those other manifestations. So the acknowledgement of my story is also filtered throughout the program. And I did that hopefully so as people go through and do the programs and learn what needs to be acknowledged in a program of healing, they've also got a bit of my story to go, oh, okay, so hopefully that, yeah, I do that too. And oh, heck, so that's related, or so I'm not silly. That is a part of what we experience, because this is what Jenni-Lee Keez experienced, and she's now sharing that, you know, that was all tied in together with her journey. Oh, I don't feel so silly now. You know, I've finally found someone who understands my thinking and my behaviors and the emotional load that I carry, and then the physical manifestations of what's happening for me. And that's what Joan was able to bring to me and bring to my table at last in my mid-30s. And she gave me the understanding, and until we have understanding as to what we're doing, then recovery can be a long drawn out, you know, arduous journey that doesn't need to be as long. So
fascinating. It's fascinating, JL.
Yeah.
Yeah, that we can have these stories that are true for us and are true that they've happened, and we've created a longer version of the reality of this by living them cellularly on a daily basis for the enduring decades of our lives. Yes, and then when we have that level of realization, that's what they are, and then we've got the tools through what you teach people to rewrite that new version of what they want their life to be like. Why do so many people still get stuck? Even though writing it down on paper, this is the old story, this is what we're getting rid of, this is how we're creating the new story. Where do you think the sticking points are for people?
Well, I guess I'll take that from my own experience. I think there's a lot of sticking points depending on what your story is, actually. One of my sticking points was giving myself permission to actually own the story and actually speak about the story. It took me a long time, even when I met Joan, to open up and begin to share with somebody what happened to me when I was little and who did what and where and how and why. But it was one thing, and I would go into fear just sharing it, even though it was a confidential space. I would be afraid that someone within my family or someone in the close inner circle would find out that I've just dobbed them in, that I've just spoken about this secret that should never, ever, you know, come to see the light of day. And I think that can be it was for me. I used to run and hide. Oh, I can't talk about it. I can't do that. I can't do that. So one of the huge stumbling blocks when you have sexual abuse, particularly in your story, or a story that connects you to someone else, that people, you know, I have, you know, my family members are known people within the community, and it's very hard when they're known people within the community, and you know everyone looks at them through certain eyes, but you know there's a whole different world, you know, that they know nothing about. And by sharing the story and bringing out the truth, you're going to dent their credibility in a way. And for me, it was really, really hard to do that. So that was a real huge block. Permission to speak and to own my story and to name those people and hold them accountable. That was a stumbling block. Also, I think the earlier, and I was 2, you know, when that first real trauma hit me really, really hard, and then it was added to. And the more it's added to, the more the fear builds up in your body. And we're talking cellular level, you know, it's all in all of your cells, you know, and anger goes along with that, and shame and blame and all of those emotions. And the greater the fear build up in the body, the greater the wall to actually allowing yourself to know your story and heal from it and live a different life as a result, knowing that people might get hurt along the way and things like that. So for me, that was the biggest hurdle, and all the fears that existed, you know, no one will like me, and I'll be blamed, and all of those fears that were drummed into me, they're as real as ever. And until we work hard and realize that they're not real, those fears belong to them, then you gradually bring it. But the greater the fear, the greater the hurdle. And
So
it's
the power of sharing your story really is the crux of what it is that you're saying here. I mean, yes, you've got the healing modalities in and around how you help people shift, but it's stepping into our power and sharing our story so that we can like lessen the impact. So we've released it so that it's not just our story, it's a story that others can hear and they can find relevance in that for themselves and their own healing so that they can move forward. Yeah.
Yeah, finding relevance and finding, well, if they've got that block of fear or that block of giving themselves permission to own their story, hearing it from somebody else and how they eventually removed that block is probably so powerful for them, to gradually work it through. And when you're working with someone who's got the lived story, the same story as you, then you're also working with somebody who hears you and gets you and understands you. And that was where I fell down. Looking back when I met Joan, I could look back at the other people that I had tried to source answers from, and I could see where that had fallen down. They just wanted to put antidepressants into me because that's where I was. That's what I mean. No one ever said, what is your story to date? And that's the most important question. If your counsellor doesn't ask you what your story is and pull out those story elements that create disturbance when you recall them, then you're not with the right person, because it's those story elements that are going to give you the clues and therefore the solutions, and ultimately the permission and the understanding to know exactly what it is that you are doing and telling yourself and what you have to undo. If you don't understand, you don't know what you have to undo, then you're not going to get anywhere. And so your story will give you those clues about what it is you actually have to do. So story is so important. And I know through my journey, particularly when I started to look at story in my mid-30s, and before I knew it was family related, I would go to my parents and, and they would like, there's so many people that boo-hoo it as well. And that can be another hurdle. Like, what's this woman doing for it? Why would she be asking you this? I now know it's because they were trying to put me on a different path because they didn't actually want me to know my story or to remember it. But it's coming up against those people who don't believe in that sort of therapy as well. That can be another hurdle. So really important to connect with those like-minded people that share that vision of you, healing and moving forward.
So going through the processes that you've been through to heal and become now that expert and the author, out of all of the different types of healings that you've been through, what do you feel most connected to?
The one I feel most connected to is the reality therapy one, which Joan, took me down that path, and reality therapy. And look, when I go in, and I might have days where I go and spend days with other people that are offering healing for their clients in different ways. And I can see that this common thread actually exists in all of them. It's the way it's presented and the way it's spoken, and they are all as credible as each other. But here today, I'm just talking about the one that supported me most. And so, as well as my story, whenever we pulled out an element that created tears or anger or whatever the emotion was for me, we would then sit and look at, okay, what was that thought you just had? Let's write down the thought. What behavior generated from that? What emotion generated? And what is the physical response? Where in your body are you feeling this particular thought right now? Okay, let's tease it out for the realness, hence reality therapy. Is this really real, or is this a thought that was put into you to protect somebody else, or to let them off the hook, or to misguide you in some way? Where did this thought come from? And then as you go through that process of looking at these thoughts that I was using to filter and perceive life by, I gradually was able to change them into what is actually real for the world. I had a lot of misguided thinking there, from the upbringing, the very controlling upbringing that I had, and the fear-driven upbringing. I was born into a fear-driven life, and everyone around me was fear-driven. So again, giving myself permission to step out and be different to the family dialogue. I suppose, as well.
Yeah.
That was something else I needed to do. And just really quickly, in addition to that, Joan also helped me look at my needs and wants and outlined it. You know, are your needs in life and your wants, what you want for your life, are they being met for you? Are they a couple of areas where you're really lacking, you know, and needs, one of them love and belonging. There are 5 needs, and one of them's love and belonging. And whoa, I didn't have that anywhere. So unless your needs and wants are being met at your level, then, you know, you're in for a bit of trouble as well. And the other 2 areas were beliefs and values. You know, what are your beliefs for life? What are your values for life moving forward? And are you actually living your beliefs and values, or are you trying so hard to live someone else's beliefs and values that you're just stuffing yourself up in the process? And I discovered that I had a lot of work to do in those areas. And then, and I know I said the beliefs and values were the last one, but the last one, the biggest one, the hugest, I know that's not, you know, in the English language, but the hugest one is our relationships. You know, our relationships hold keys. And once I began to venture down that road and explore the relationship I had with my father, with my mother, and other people along the way that came into my life, you know, the tears just flowed. And so we had to sort out, now hang on, what's going on here that you're putting up walls to these people, that you're crying, that you're feeling angry at them, that you're shutting down at times and you feel like you can't speak. You know, what did you learn through these relationships, and how are they still controlling your life moving forward? Do we need to do some work? And therefore, do we keep these people in our life if we want to? What does that look like moving forward? Or do we need to eliminate because it's really too toxic? So there's a whole lot of a whole new area then, once we get into relationships, to have a look at that impact on your story presently and then moving forward as well. So there's a lot of different areas, but they all connect and come together eventually.
It is so true. I know the power of telling the story, whether they want to hear it or not, whether the family wants to hear it or friends want to hear it. I understand telling the story. I liken it for me, once the stories were told, that it was like turning on the light. So the things in the room, that in the dark room that scared you, that could have been absolutely anything, and in our mind made it much more than it was, that when told the story, it literally turned the light on and shone a light into the corners and the recesses, and it showed, you know, what was true. And it really enabled me to step into my power, just simply telling the stories. It didn't necessarily make other people comfortable, and that's okay. Change does meet resistance, and you've found this yourself, JL, that, you know, the proximity that we keep when we're going through process, it's not that necessarily the proximity we keep at the end of the process or as we continue the process, because we're all still a work in process. It's so true. I love it. Can you tell us a little bit more about your work that you do as far as the programs that you run? Because many of our listeners would be interested in that.
Okay. Yeah, I get with the programs that I run, I do have an outline. With the Zoom one, I have a 10-week program that I have created, and that's sort of a guideline, a thread running through the back. And I guess I've set it up that way because I want to be able to bring into my sessions, you know, all the important areas that I found important to me, and I don't want to leave them out. However, once we start, I quite often find that the journey goes out this way, and then it might come back in again, and then it goes out the other way, and then it comes in. And it's very, very much client-based. Once we establish that rapport and that trust is there for us, then sometimes that actually goes out the window. I start at the very beginning by looking at the story. You know, I want them, and I don't want to feed them. I want them to tell me their story, and I want them to be able to work out for themselves which elements of their story is their eating disorder or their discomfort, however it's presenting in their body at the moment. How does the story link to that discomfort that they're currently experiencing. And then, you know, in the first session, look, the first session is always free, you know, to get to know me, to understand, look, is this lady somebody that I feel comfortable working with? And then you go away and you have a think about it, and then you come back. And I do send that 10-week program out so they have an idea of, you know, the sort of things I'll be looking at. But in the first session, then once a client says, yep, want to go ahead with you, the first thing we do is, okay, look at the story. I want to understand you. I want to know who you are and who you're presenting to me at the moment. And so, you know, I'll be at this end writing down all those notes. And then I throw it back to them. Right, you have identified A, B, C, and D. Which one do you think is the most important starting point for you? Where would you like to start? And this can be quite a challenge as well. So I do encourage them to start with the smallest one, the one that they feel that they can navigate through and have success perhaps quickly, or it's not as scary as the others. They're not going to start at the top end of their fears, because that would just negate the whole thing. And then what they make a decision. Okay, then we'll talk about it, and we'll look at what I said before, the thought attached, the behavior, the emotion, the physical response, and all of that. And then look at, okay, if this is how you're living it at the moment and it's having this negative effect, how could we change the thought? You know, what could you do differently? And how would that impact those other 3 areas moving forward? And then between this session and the next session, are you ready to put that into place? If so, how would you like to do it? It's very much client-based. I want them right from the get-go to be in control of their healing journey, but guided by me as to what we need to be discussing and acknowledging in that healing journey. And then, you know, and then along the way, once we build that up and they get into the process of, they know, yep, we're going to look at thought, we're going to look at this, and, you know, it just rattles off the back, and they can begin to identify and open up their world and begin to understand it. Then you'll bring in those other parameters, needs and wants, beliefs and values. Where do they really come from? And then gradually, and that's dependent on the client and the story that they bring to the table. When do you bring relationship acknowledgement into the process? And sometimes they can bring it in quite quickly. For me, it was because my sexual abuse wasn't only in the family, I had a range of people. It was the outside members that were acknowledged first before the family members come on board, or before I remembered all of that and gave myself permission to talk about it. So, you know, we then start to look at the impacting relationships, and there's a lot of exercises to do around that. I know one of the most empowering one amongst a lot of them, and it's coming to mind now, so I guess that's the one that I share, is Joan encouraged me to, because I was still in the mindset at 37 when I met her that I had to be this tall, gorgeous, leggy blonde with the hourglass figure and everything like that to be accepted. And I was still stuck in that, you know, and it was like, right, I want you to go to Marion Shopping Centre. You'll know that, Charlene, here in Adelaide. And I want you to just stand there, and I just want you to watch people. Like, don't like make it obvious, but, you know, watch people. Have a look at the relationships that walk past you. Have a look at, sorry, my light's just gone. I'll get it back on as I'm talking. Have a look at the males and females together. What are their body shapes? What are they doing? What is the color of their hair? What, you know, and from that process, sorry, I lost my train of thought, but from that process, you know, I acknowledged, hang on, he's a really good looking dude. And, you know, me back then being the highly critical person I was, it's like, what is he doing with her? You know, because that was my belief system. You know, you had to be good looking to be accepted. You had to be this and you had to be that. And I would see all these different body shapes and personalities and hair colors and all of that sort of thing. And gradually over that, and then really connected relationships too, of people that weren't your everyday gorgeous looking, you know, model looking people. And they were having fabulous lives and they had great connections with their relationships and all of that. And gradually that thought that I had been taught was changed around into, you know, from me observing other people. And the other way was to open up discussion and dialogue with people in my inner circle that I knew I could trust. You know, is this how you look at life? Is this how you perceive it? Is this how, and you find it, hang on, they don't think like that, and they don't think like that, and they live like this. And so being from a very strong religious upbringing, that was another hurdle for me as well. And I say that lightly because people do have their religious orientations and they can be very, very valuable. Unfortunately for me, it was another restriction that I found in my life, the way it was presented to me. So, you know, there were all of those hurdles to get over as well. So
I love it, JL. This is
so it's all in those programs to say, you know, I haven't got it here to say this is week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
No, well, that's not what they want to know. They only want to know the outcomes, just quietly. That's how humans work. But I love it, JL, that you've got this beautiful blended program that's self-paced at the pace of the healer. And that's important so that you don't feel like you're forced in your journey of ascension. You don't feel like you're forced in your journey of stepping up and living the best life that you can live. So it's amazing. And Jo is very gentle in her approach, and it's a great place to heal and a great place to be. So to get access to her beautiful books and to also get access to JL, just reach out to her website, which is jlkeez.com. Is that right?
.com.au. I've still got the
.com.au. There you go, .com.au. And we'll put that in the link and also in the description, and reach out and have that one-on-one session with her. See if she's a good fit. I'm sure she will be, and let her help you on your healing journey. And from us today with Healing Through Love, it's a bye from me and a bye from JL. See you later, guys.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Healing Through Love. You can get further resources, see the show notes, or simply reach out to us via our website at htlaustralia.org. Thanks so much for joining us, and we look forward to your company next time on the Healing Through Love podcast.